Are you questioning your reality? Do you feel gaslighted? It's not you, it's the media. I am Suchitra Vijayan and I'll be joined by Bhakti Sringarpure and Madhuri Shastri to eviscerate the propaganda, set the record straight, and offer much needed moral clarity. Tune in each week. It's not you, it's the media, a podcast by the Polis Project.
Welcome to It's Not You, It's the Media. Our episode today is titled Unethical Reporting of Sexual Violence. And we are going to talk about a really difficult year when it came to reporting and not reporting at all on questions of sexual violence, rape, and sexual violence in prisons. And we are going to divide this into three different issues that we've had as we've analyzed coverage of the last year. The first one would be called hyper-reporting or over-reporting or fabricating reportage and journalism. And here we are referring, of course, to the mass rape hoax fabricated by various Israeli NGO reports and then turned into a massive investigation by the New York Times, which was then debunked many times over. And so we're going to look at why there was such an interest in so much reporting, despite there being actual witnesses and testimonies that were recanted. And why is it that there was such a fixation with creating a hoax around this fabricated idea of rapists that were Palestinian, that were Hamas, and so on. The second trend we're looking at is the absolute opposite: zero reporting, pure omission, and an attempt to bury the story. And here we're talking about why is it that something that's been floating around in various media, various international media, is not at all reported in mainstream liberal media. Of course, we're talking here about the horrific and excruciating to read B'Tselem report that exposed all the violence and sexual violence in particular and systemic rape in Israeli prisons of Palestinian prisoners, many of them underage, young boys, young girls. And what does it mean to absolutely and 100% ignore this? And of course, the horrific phenomena of a leaked video of a gang rape of a Palestinian prisoner, and a man that went on TV to become a proud celebrity around being part of this particular gang rape. And the third thing is where we really worry about what it means to report on sexual violence and rape at all. What does it mean to construct a perfect victim, to have a woman's body written about in ways that crosses the boundary from ethical to unethical because of how salacious, how overly detailed it is? And I think this is where we are likely to have the most trouble sort of thinking through what is the right way. How do we talk about women's bodies? How do we talk about victims' bodies? So let's start actually with the Palestine question. And perhaps we can start with the mass rape hoax.
I think we need to start with the New York Times reporting. Jeffrey Gettleman wrote a very dramatically titled piece called Screams Without Words: How Hamas Weaponized Sexual Violence on October 7th. I usually pride myself as someone who could read something once and remember and speak. While researching this, I literally had to take notes because it was not just one. The list of things that Gettleman, his fellow non-reporters, because it's also important to note that three people wrote this New York Times piece. One of them was not even a reporter, who had no experience reporting, let alone report on sexual violence. So for the first time in my life, I actually had to make notes because there was so much information to go through. As I said, New York Times published this very salacious piece of reporting, and it was published by the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jeffrey Gettleman and two others. And the premise of the reporting was that Times conducted a 2-month investigation, and it established that attacks against women were not isolated, but was part of a broader systematic attack. While this is the premise, nothing in the piece actually provides evidence of the systematic attack. So Gettleman does what he's always done throughout his reporting career, which is to take something and sensationalize it, orientalize it, and really make it more about a badly written fiction rather than actual reporting. And one of the things that really happens is that rather than giving us proof of systematic, once you say systematic in legal language, which means that you have to provide series of instances or evidences of proof, instead, what really Gettleman does is that he zeroes in on this one woman. Her name is Gal Abdouche, who he claims was a victim of rape. He says that she's become this symbol of horror visited upon Israeli women and girls on 7th of October. But the Abdush family themselves have repudiated this claim, saying that there was no evidence that she was raped. They say that they were manipulated by the New York Times and had no idea that the newspaper was going to actually float this rape narrative about their daughter. And there's an incredibly painful moment in which the family says, the reporter named our daughter as a rape victim without our permission after misleading us about the subject of the story. And we read about our daughter's spread legs in the New York Times, right? Like imagine as parents, you are speaking to someone, and then, again, the mounting evidence, shows that this was at best atrocity propaganda, at worst, a salacious piece of reporting that is helping further the Israeli genocidal mission on the ground. Some of the other things, again, as I said, there's so much more to go. We could spend the next 30 minutes going over every single piece of evidence we have against what New York Times did. They claim to have 4 eyewitnesses. One of them is only named with the first name. The 3 other eyewitnesses have been consistently proved as not being credible, who have changed their stories over and over again. They again use a nonprofit called Zaka as one of the main nonprofits, which was the emergency response team. We now know that Zaka itself has a history of manipulating evidence and actually played a role in destroying any forensic evidence we could have gotten. Moreover, Zaka was founded by a man accused of serial rapes over decades. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but I do want to say that if people are interested, they should look up the work by Electronic Intifada and others who really first broke the story, followed by Intercept and others who've consistently gone on to report on this. But again, what Gettleman really did was not provide proof. It's very important that he fabricated evidence, not provide proof, has not proved that there was a systematic rape, but instead provided atrocity propaganda that was really one of the core pieces of work that continues to help justify Israelis' genocidal, I don't know called what, on Gaza, continues to be used by everybody from Biden to Harris to justify their position of continuing to arm Israel.
Suchitra, thanks for that very succinct and wonderful summary. This idea of fabricating sexual violence against women is not a new tactic of imperial nations or powers. It's been happening since time immemorial. This idea that, for example, with the Black Peril, the panic that Black men were raping holy white women in colonies, that would then paint the Black man as this savage barbarian, against whom they would justify all manner of atrocious behavior, including extrajudicial killings, lynchings, all kinds of things. So painting this idea of like a rapacious, vicious, flattened population, right, that is out to get our holy women, and we must protect them. So this is essentially exactly that, except that these states now have an arsenal at their disposal, including big media companies, to facilitate and do the dirty work for them, right? To just fabricate this nonsense, to publish it on the front page, abdicating any and all journalistic ethics, any sort of fact checking, and putting it on the front page in order to enable, to give Zionists the fodder, basically, to enable the genocidal onslaught in Gaza. And that is just what is so incredible about this time that we're living in. I think, Suchitra, these are your words, right? Who is really the foot soldiers of this empire? Is media empires, and it's horrific, despite the deep-seated belief that this is what Arab men are like, and these are the holy women that need to be protected, despite, as you said, reports and reports and reports about the fabrication of this story. As recently as the debate, Kamala is mentioning it, and approving more and more arms trades to Israel.
Yeah.
It's just despicable. It's all wine, new bottles, and somehow nobody is just questioning it. It just keeps on continuing to happen.
Yeah, exactly. The lack of any questioning is what it was the most perplexing to me. The first time I heard of this accusation, this allegation, was when a friend sent me a report by the Physicians of Human Rights, and it was an Israel branch. And I have come across Physicians of Israel before, and I was a bit surprised because the logo and the look of it was very different. And I realized that they had the same name, but they were not the global organization. And I went through that report 3 or 4 times, bit by bit by bit. And one of the place where you can see what's going on is in the footnotes, because they created these narratives about a woman who was raped and then her body was dragged through the streets. And then when you look for evidence, there's a footnote saying footage was taken off Twitter, or you go back and you say footage was deleted from wherever. So it's like, so you have no evidence at all. Everything you found, it's all hearsay. And then I saw that some of that, and I didn't want to believe it, but I believed it right away. I believed something like this happened, though I could not quite reckon with the timeline
Right.
of the Hamas attacks, and this kind of protracted thing that they were claiming was going on during the day. So the operation, what they did, how they got the hostages, none of it made sense with also having this agenda of sexual violence. But I believed it because, what have we been hearing for the past 10 years? Believe her, believe her, believe her. And they have manipulated us into this notion. We have come so far into thinking about, we must believe the victim, we must believe, this kind of testimony, even if we don't have hard proof. And of course, during war, of course, in war zones, in militarized zones, militants do rape and kill and torture and pillage. So I believed it. And then the debunking started to come out, and it was almost immediate. And this is what's different about this particular media moment, is that the debunking began right away. But by then it had gained a lot of steam with Hollywood Zionists who were trying to really perpetrate this. And then a whole new ethos came about, which was what Jeffrey Gettleman and gang jumped upon, which is, in such incidents of such heavy sexual violence, it's too traumatic to gather evidence. One must not push for gathering evidence. And people who've done years and years, decades of work in places like Congo and places where rape is a weapon of war and so on and so forth, was said, it doesn't matter. You have to still gather evidence. Of course, it's hard work. You still have to gather evidence. But they jumped on these certain kind of hashtag trends, certain movements that things like the Me Too movement has brought about, and manipulated and gaslighted the world into really going for the story. And then, of course, there's the racism. Yes, the barbaric Muslims are, of course, out to get the fair maidens. So, the Orientalism is ages old, and immediately it's believable. It's probable. You don't have to prove it.
Also, just want to flag that Hillary Clinton perpetrated similar sexual violence myths under the Obama administration to attack Libya. Hillary Clinton openly said that they have proof that the Libyan soldiers were taking Viagra to rape. So again, the rape narrative was used to justify the attack on Libya under the Obama administration. We have to remember that, again, New York Times similarly did the same thing with the Caliphate when it came to the Caliphate podcast with Winnie Kalimachi, where people
Yes,
were
that's right.
consistently saying that she had stolen actual archives from the country. What she was creating was not plausible. Again, the difference, as Bhakti said, was that with Rukmini Kalimachi, where people were consistently debunking for so long, it wasn't done the way that it happened with Gettleman's piece.
Absolutely. And I think, in a way that brings us to the related issue of who is actually doing the acts of sexual violence, who is using rape as a torture tool, who is actually perpetrating these heinous, absolutely brutal acts. And what is just sort of astounding is that we ended up with zero reporting in mainstream liberal media about a video that got leaked, that went around, okay, of a Palestinian prisoner being gang raped. Absolutely horrific. And there were many, many ways in which I tried to avoid as soon as I heard something like this. But you know what? The truth is you couldn't avoid it. You at least saw the beginning of how this came out. You saw the other Palestinian prisoners in that particular wherever they were in that room, and in these kind of messed up torture positions. It was everywhere, and nothing. And it was aligned with the B'Tselem report, and yet we got absolute zero reporting. It was an act of omission that was so acute and so racist. It's like, and every time the White House was questioned about it, they said, "Oh, we are asking Israel to conduct an investigation." And again, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they continue to use this line: sexual violence by Hamas. Meanwhile, who is doing the actual rape and torture?
No,
Yeah.
it is, and I think one of the horrible things, the bet when we were preparing for this, I actually went through the report, and I don't think anyone should go through this report. It's so it guts you, it depletes you, it just takes it away. So I think it's a good time for us to kind of give the trigger warning, but also the report is rightly called "Welcome to Hell." And what the report does, it documents instances of torture that's happened since October 7th. And let's also understand that it's not just B'Tselem, there's a long history of various organizations systematically documenting the widespread torture, degrading, humiliating treatment, sexual violence of Palestinians for years. This is not the first time. So the report itself does two things. The report is called "Welcome to Hell," and what was gut wrenching is that that is what Israelis tell Palestinians who are arrested without due process and brought to these prisons. The first thing the Palestinian hears before they step into this prison is "Welcome to Hell," and that's the name that the report takes after. The second thing that the report says is that Israeli prisons are no longer prisons, but they are a network of torture chamber. And they go on to systematically document, these are based on a series of interviews, 55 interviews, if I'm not mistaken, of people who have been arrested. This is only since October 7th. Let's not forget there is copious amounts of information that B'Tselem and others have produced over years about the torture and sexual violence against Palestinians. The report very clearly and systematically lays out that the aim is torture, humiliation, and psychological damage. It starts from refusal of food, of water, to consistent and repeated ways in which they are tortured, they are harassed, the sexual nature of the punishment. Um, Again, what is important about the B'Tselem report is not anything new, but simply to now argue that what was already dungeons of hell is now the transformation of a prison system that was already extrajudicial, illegal, into a network of torture camps. What you really want to understand is that these are not prisons. This is for all purpose is Abu Ghraib. This is your Guantanamo. This is your extraordinary rendition sites, all wrapped up into this one place where Palestinians, as people, are picked up without due process and tortured, the sole aim being to humiliate, punish, and break them. And reading that was, I do not suggest, we do not need any more of these reports because existing reports are enough. But that's what the B'Tselem report does. And it also shows us that the US has been consistently made aware of the sexual violence. Also important to note that Josh Paul, who was a State Department worker, went on CNN and said that in 2021, another Israeli NGO reported to the State Department that a 15-year-old Palestinian child was raped in Israeli prisons. When the State Department raised this issue with the Israelis went ahead and shut down the NGO. Another proof that the US State
Amazing.
Department, for a long time, is aware and has knowledge of Israel's use of sexual violence against Palestinians, especially children, as a systematic way of doing this. Again, it just feels so wrong to repeat what is something that so many of us have known for so long, but has zero mainstream reporting.
I think it's just mind boggling to me that this type of systematic um, sexual torture and rape in prisons that has been perpetrated, as you rightly pointed out, by the US government is simply not news enough. Um, and this is, as you said, Bhakti, to your earlier point, this idea of like, oh, we don't need evidence. And then what do you actually do in the face of all of this evidence? You simply choose to ignore it because it doesn't further your narrative. And it really makes you question, and actually not even question, see very plainly who the media is batting for and what they're trying to do. And it's just this idea that we obviously talk about this later when we talk about the impact of Me Too and things like that, but there is no real investment on the media's part or on anyone's part, really, policymakers, lawmakers, whatever it is, to really dismantle patriarchy or whatever the word is that they like to use. And this will lead us into our next point, but sort of like to pick the certain cases as they did, whether it's fabrication like with Gettleman or with the other two cases that we will discuss soon, to pick it to sort of absolve themselves of the accountability of not reporting on certain other cases. And it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And all the masks are now off. That is the only thing I will say that's different about the media moment. I mean, I read sort of lefty media, or some sources that I believe are still trustworthy, and I absolutely have unsubscribed from all the other media that I call genocide media. But what's interesting is that you can consistently just read headlines in Israeli newspapers. Many of them are in dual Hebrew and English, and they are just out there. They are just telling the truth. The man who was part of the gang rape of the Palestinian prisoner went on to become a celebrity. He came on a talk show with a big mask, and then he, in the next show, went on to take off the mask, and then he went on to do and post, make videos and post them. And his thing is, working for the nation is hard work, and sometimes you have to do bad stuff, but he does not regret a single moment. And yes, granted, this is right-wing media in Israel. Okay, so it doesn't mean every single person agrees with it, but the fact that such a phenomena can go on and just say this stuff while the video has leaked, while this is a live situation, and then of course the US and Kamala Harris and all can go on and regurgitate the same lies, tells us what a duplicitous and morally depraved moment we are in. And of course we have Donald Trump, who has also been indicted for various sexual
Right.
violence types of things, and that's cool. He's standing for president. He may even be president again. So we are in a truly extraordinarily depraved moment, but the only thing I can say is it's all there to see. you know
Yeah.
10 years ago, I don't think it was there to see. I think I would have required more hand holding to see, to connect all the dots. But now it's just there to see. And what's interesting, of course, is the consent is completely manufactured. Whatever the media has been doing, the consent has been completely manufactured. No, Israel has the right to self defense. That self defense means endless attack, endless brutality, rape, torture, whatever. And of course, what kills me as the mother of a teenage son is that these are, and it kills all of us. It does. I don't have to have a teenage son for it, but it's like these kids, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, children, absolute children. We know this is a war on children, but then when you put the sexual violence thing on, overlay that on top of it, it's even more absolutely brutal. And it's just, I don't know how we live in a world that is okay with it. Not everyone is okay with it, but at least mainstream media is okay with it. our imperial governments are okay with it.
Yeah, it's just a narcissistic, toxically masculine state protecting one another, because they are all just perpetrators cloaking each other with this impunity. And not only cloaking each other with impunity, funding it, enabling it, because ultimately the dehumanization of Arab lives, Muslim lives, non white lives is so deeply entrenched. It is not even up for questioning. It's not up for questioning. It's like, it's a given. It's a fait accompli. We do not think these people are human. We do not care about their children. We do not care about all children and all women and all people and patriarchy. No, we care about our narcissistic control. It's a narcissistic state, completely obsessed with control, and annihilation of non-white people. And they are just cloaking each other, and they always will. And you're right, Bhakti, the gaslight is so evident now. But I think truly for a lot of people who I think identify as politically liberal, it has been quite a con with the New York Times, and it's very difficult because these people are already sort of geared to dismiss lefty media as, agenda driven. And now they have to see that their own media that they have paraded around or upheld as bastions of clarity and ethics are basically fabricating stuff. And I think it's very painful to accept that you, as a consumer of this media, have been conned.
Yeah.
So it requires a certain amount of work on your part to think like, oh, okay, like, why did I believe this and what should I do? And I hope that people are doing that work of divesting. I'm not sure, because I heard a podcast, I heard a conversation, and I've not fact checked this, but the New York Times subscriptions have grown more than ever this year or something. So for all this concept of, divest from genocidal media, what is actually happening? Are people really questioning? Are people really saying, okay, this is a media that is gaslighting me and I've been conned and I want to look for my
Well, that
sources?
makes complete sense to me, because remember there was, I think it was Intercept that leaked the memo. Is how do you report on Palestine? You try not to say the word Palestine many times. You create this idea that there's Palestine and then there's Gaza.
Uh-huh.
You don't say apartheid, you don't say occupation, and you always just repeat, as they say, stenographer media. You just repeat and copy paste every point that the Israeli media is giving you. So of course I'm just, I'm horrified but not surprised that their subscriptions have grown and that they are triumphant more than ever. I mean, it is just, what a sad state. What the other thing is, of course, we need to talk about is that this is all the zero omission, the zero reporting, the omission, and all that particular theme. The truth is, we are in a woke media environment where it is considered important to report on sexual violence. We've just indicted Harvey Weinstein. He's been locked up. We've had a very intense and active and dynamic thinking around Me Too and how we should be talking about it. And in the middle of all this gory stuff coming out of Palestine, I couldn't believe that India had to go have its yet another gory gang rape. And that led to a whole set of questions around, what are we doing? And then the other thing that's unfolding now is the story of Giselle Pellicot in France. Also, lots of details, lots of reporting. What do we make of these sort of juxtaposing trends, or these kind of overlapping yet contradictory sort of ways in which reporting on sexual violence pans out? It's such a saturated moment for this theme.
I'll introduce the Giselle Pellicot case for listeners who might not know. The mass rape of Giselle Pellicot has taken the Western media by storm. Giselle is a 71-year-old French woman, and it turns out she was being regularly drugged and raped essentially by her husband, who of 50 years, Dominique Pellicot, who would also invite strangers to rape her when she was unconscious. And this happened in her own bedroom, and she had absolutely no idea. It happened for a number of years. It's horrific, between 2011 and 2020. And, The details are awful. The media, for its part, has not revealed so many gory details, but even what they have revealed is really gut wrenching. And what's interesting is that she would have never found out had it not been for some women that brought charges against her husband for taking pictures up their skirt at shopping malls across France. So the Avignon police proceed to follow through with these charges and uncover all of this evidence of the rape and assaults of his wife that he had inexplicably catalogued and filmed and retained on his laptop. And the case is on trial, and France is being roiled by protests, with many people obviously questioning women specifically, questioning the legacy of the Me Too movement, and also how sexual violence cases are handled by the Justice Department. I read that 94% of rape cases in France are dismissed without any action. And also, there's a robust conversation about consent and things like that. It's important to note here that Giselle has waived her right to anonymity. So the media have sort of been invited into the trial. And just yesterday, I saw a pop up that she's being hailed as a feminist hero, and whatever. So it's really a really gory situation. The media has not, the nuts and bolts of it seem fine. Bhakti, as you said, this idea of the woke media reporting on sexual violence, that facade is very much maintained. But my real issue here is what we had started talking about earlier, mentioned earlier, is this idea of the perfect victim, which, I mean, again, what happened with Giselle is really, really awful and horrific. But she is the perfect victim. She's a white woman. She's elderly. She's very much the sort of grandmother next door. She'd been married for many, many years. And obviously her rapist was her husband. And obviously this is like, oh, how could her husband do this? Which is really bizarre to me. The cut actually said that what is even more confounding in this case is who the perpetrator is. It's her husband. And it's like, but where do you think all of this intimate partner violence occurs? Are you crazy?
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so she's a very relatable figure within French society. And, they often talk about her relatability and why that has been such an important feature of this case. And they analyze everything from what she's worn to come into court, how she's wearing these Breton blouses, and, she's covered her eyes behind sunglasses. Poor Giselle has had to say that she's a wreck behind all of this facade, but they're very much, focusing on how she looks, the outward appearance, and, the fact that she's relatable and that she's the perfect victim has sort of been reinforced. The BBC has said, I quote, "The ordinary nature of the couple at the center of this trial, middle-class pensioners and grandparents, has made it easy for observers to identify with the story." And then the protester in a Guardian article was quoted saying that the case has resonated in France because they are, quote, Mr. and Mrs. Tout le monde,
Wow.
And so this idea of the fact that there needs to be a perfect victim and the media can just seize on it is a big issue, and it's poisonous because there is the implication that certain people are more believable than the others. And our entire conversation has shown us that. Israeli women more believable than Palestinian women. Any other white woman much more believable than any other woman of color. And it basically allows the media to say, well, should we not report on this? Like, what would you rather we did report on this? And it's like, no. The question is, why does all of your reporting look like this? That's the real question. And it just completely inhibits them from answering this. And this perfect victim situation, I mean, what happens, then when you have a Palestinian prisoner? Or what happens when the prisoner is male or the victim is male, Then what happens to the media's mission to be woke and dismantle the patriarchy language?
Yeah. What is this idea around relatability with a person who has endured horrific sexual violence? Who relates to this? All we want is to not relate to that. So this media fabrication that this is a relatable person, and it's just kind of I'm just overwhelmed by this idea. I don't relate.
But also, being a perfect victim is a media narrative. That doesn't mean you're going to get justice.
Yeah.
Right? For example, remember when the Anita Hill case happened? Anita Hill was brought in for these hearings, and Joe Biden, a much younger Joe Biden, was the man presiding over it. Anita Hill, as a black woman, was not considered to be a credible witness or a perfect victim. We were told that if she wasn't as sassy, as black, as right, and
Yeah.
then almost 3 decades later or more, you have the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearing where we get to know about his violations and sexual assaults. And his victim was again described as the perfect victim. Somebody who went to Ivy League schools, somebody who was so well put together, who was articulate. And as these hearings about this was happening, and she was credible, she was believable, but Brett Kavanaugh was still confirmed as the Supreme Court Justice. And just as these hearings were going on social media, we saw women literally narrate the most horrific things that happened to them, saying that please, let's not do this. Yet these narrations were articulate, they were thoughtful, they were gut wrenching. And the media kept repeating this narrative of these are women who are credible, they are narrating their stories. So even being a perfect victim simply means that you become a media trope. It doesn't mean you're going to get justice.
Right.
Narrating your pain, your suffering, then becomes the spectacle. You become the salacious material. So
Absolutely.
often, what we're really left with are stories of more salaciousness, stories of more acts of we become almost voyeuristic witnesses
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
to
100%.
we can call it moral witnessing, we can call it bearing witness, but in reality we are salacious, voyeuristic people just consuming this information
Mm-hmm.
without really being able to do any
Yeah.
real meaningful material change.
And the Kolkata rape in India, the Calcutta gang rape, really brought that home for me. Where is the line between ethically reporting on a case there the evidence has already been tampered, there's all this madness around the facts, there is allegations that it was suicide, there's all this stuff. So where is the line between ethically thinking through what is going on, giving sensitivity, connecting it to a larger systemic issue around rape, patriarchy, sexual violence towards women, and just straight up producing pornography? Straight up pornography. It is shocking to read to this day. 8 hours ago, something has posted and it's regurgitating the same things. How many grams of semen was found in her? Where exactly were all the different marks and bites and scratches on her body? Where exactly she was assaulted? How many men? You speculate and speculate, and it's extraordinary. And this is pornography. This is not reporting. This is papers trying to sell more papers and trying to get more viewers and eyeballs on their thing, and each paper outdid itself in India. And what shocked me about it, of course, was the case in 2012 when she was called Nirbhaya, where she became a different kind of icon. And that's interesting to me too, Madhuri, that there is this idea that somebody becomes an icon because they went through something so extraordinary. But in the case of Nirbhaya, the word means fearless, and they tried to keep her identity and try to keep her family name out of the papers. And there was some sensitivity because it was the first one that had rocked the nation in that particular way. But she died. And then the same thing with the victim in Calcutta. She's no more, but the French woman, she gets to live out in like celebrity sunglasses or something, this feminist icon status. It's all so confusing and strange, and I don't understand where we are anymore when it comes to this lack of ethics, lack of care around thinking about women's bodies, around thinking about what is the goal of the reporting. The goal is, justice is one goal, creating awareness is another goal, creating citizens, younger people who try to understand their society better, confronting the demons within our society is one goal. Is the media allowing for any of that to happen? Of course not.
I think what really struck me about what Suchitra and Bhakti you were saying was this idea of, salacious viewing and voyeurism and pornography. It feels like this is again another masculine living out of a rape fantasy almost,
Mhm.
And you're even seeing it a little bit with the reporting on, the Diddy is now being indicted, and uh,
Mm.
each and every time it feels like there should have been a step forward, and any lessons that were learned from Me Too have now been have just burnt to the ground. What about this idea of um, not like protect the honor of a woman? I'm not saying it like this, but sort of protect the dignity of someone who has suffered at like this kind of atrocious, horrific violence. It doesn't even have to be on this scale. But Suchitra, what you said, even with the fabrication of this poor woman, she wasn't raped. Gettleman fabricated it. And what does it mean to have yourself used as a pawn in somebody else's rape and destruction fantasy? What about that? What about, and again, this is going to sound like whataboutism, whataboutism, but it really isn't. There is this idea of ethical, meaningful reporting geared towards facilitating or creating some kind of systemic change. And the media has failed, catastrophically failed at any of that. And all they do is allow sort of for certain people to be scapegoated. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, yes, horrific, horrific, monstrous man. But that has sort of allowed everybody to just dust their hands off and pretend like, oh, now we're clean, Hollywood's clean. When you don't, it prevents you from really engaging with the systemic, daily, quotidian acts of abuse and violence that people face at the hands of patriarchy. Women, men, children, everyone. And it allows the media to basically, brandish itself and basically, I don't know, rest on its laurels, and for the justice system to rest on its laurels, and for everyone to just be like, don't damn us if we do and don't damn us if we don't, which is really
I
disgusting.
think it's also that we allow for these people, excuse my French, we allow for these assholes to be rewarded for their shitty, unethical behavior. Get along with Hillary Clinton, was invited to Colombia on an incredibly well funded conference about reporting on sexual violence, which had so Sheryl Sandberg and some of the most inauthentic corporatized neoliberal shell of human beings sitting and discussing how to report on rape after you have been debunked. We are rewarding assholes and the most villainous of people for this being done. We legally lynched a man on the 24th
Yes.
without evidence. A group of unelected Supreme Court justices lynched a black man having known for a crime he did not commit, evidence that he was innocent, a million signatures saying do not kill him because they can,
Including the family of the victim, by the way.
including the family of the victim. I mean, where are we? Where are we? Like, we are literally rewarding. And that's also what New York Times does. You are teaching people that you can be absolutely unethical, shitty.
Yeah.
You can be an occupier, a colonizer, a Zionist, and you will be rewarded for it. That's
Absolutely. And just to conclude, I'm going to add that we have the other trend when people are reporting on women's issues or trying to take progressive views. This idea that has come up again and again, that there are black Ethiopian women soldiers committing fighting in the Israeli army, or the fact that, like, actually some people in the Israeli army are vegan, so their leather boots and their all the leather stuff that they have to wear has to be vegan. So we celebrate this sort of hollow progressivism, completely oblivious to the irony of the butchery these people are actually committing on a daily basis. This is feminism. This is where we are, a decade after Me Too or whatever, things that were very instrumental, but everything has just collapsed. And where do we go from here? This whole episode we have talked about how not to report on sexual violence, basically. And I think we are so in the weeds that I don't even know where to begin if we have to think about an ethical approach to reporting on sexual violence, just generally.
so one of the things that I wanted to bring up as a part of our conversation was that, Bhakti, you said, like, what have we learned? I think what we've learned is that we've given monsters and some of the most unethical people on the planet the language of progressive left and critical thinking to justify their acts of violence, sexual abuse, and everything else. And yeah, I guess for me, this is just, I don't know if I know the way forward, but for me, this has been some kind of a space for us to at least collectively speak, articulate our rage,
Hmm.
and hopefully that's what we'll continue doing. That we will keep having these conversations and at least for ourselves try to make sense of what's coming towards us and what it means for us to witness all of this. And hopefully we'll be joined by my listeners next week as we discuss another episode, another gut wrenching
Yeah.
topic, and take it from there.
Yeah. And as you know, if you think you're going mad, like I say, it's not you, it's the media.